Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists 5 days a week. My name is Eva and my guest today is Tom Booth, and we chat about storytelling and working with publishers.
I had this moment where I joked to myself, I was like, I'll never beat any of my characters in a staring contest because, you're looking right at them. I've never seen a picture book for kids in which the characters have a staring contest. That moment where I was like, that's the idea.
Tom is an amazing illustrator, an author, art director, originally from Pennsylvania, now living and working in New York City. He has a degree in history and studio art, and since 2008 he has been working for Scholastic, the publisher of educational kids literature, in various roles, the latest one being art director. On the side, he has worked with publishers like Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, Workman Publishing, and Nicktoons. He published his first children's book, Derek Jeter Presents Night at the Stadium and Who Wins, in 2016, and in the summer of 2017 he published his latest book, Don't Blink, inspired by his Girl and a Turtle illustration, which was part of the Inktober 2014 challenge. So please welcome Tom Booth, and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Tom here. Hi!
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining, for sure.
Absolutely, and I wanted to just say right off the bat, I think this channel that you've created is awesome, and I love that you've done such a great job about getting people who are so creative, to answer a lot of these questions and out in the world. So I just think you're doing an amazing job. So thank you
so
for
much.
that.
Oh, thank you. And I'm really happy that you took time and joined us here and share your artistic story. I'm super excited. So let's just dive right in, and maybe we can start with your background, and you can share some of your stories from your childhood, how you got to art, and maybe when was the turning point for you, okay, I want to take this seriously.
Sure. So I am from outside Philadelphia, and ever since I was like 5 or 6, I wanted to draw because I was copying my brother, basically. My brother was constantly drawing, and I was trying to, relate to him. And so I would repeat what he was doing. And then he kind of got more interested in sports and that kind of thing. And then I kept going. And ever since then, I've just sort of done it constantly. I didn't go to an art school for it, though. I went to Hamilton College, which is a liberal arts college, and I studied history, and I double majored in studio art, but it's not a formal art school. So the classes I took weren't very in-depth. But I just sort of kept doing it. I did the cartoons for my college paper, and then after I graduated, I wanted to get into publishing, so I started working at Scholastic, and I still work there today. And then I just kept doing stories at night, and eventually I caught the interest of an agent, and he was the one who kind of helped put me in front of the right kind of people to get some of my stories published. So there's more details in there and more, great people who helped me along the way, but it took time. Yeah. So it wasn't a fast track, let's say.
So how many years was it for you, from the time okay, I will take the art more seriously, and until now?
So I think I was probably 26 when I kind of sat myself down and was like, all right, you're working all the time, and you can do X, Y, and Z, but you're not really pushing yourself. So I think I started pushing myself around that time. I tried to do a graphic novel, and I was so unfamiliar with that process that I had an agent, and this is my first agent, and she, I think, could tell that I needed a lot of help. She saw the potential, she saw that I could do it, but I was just constantly how do I do this? How do I do that? And I was just sending her way too many questions, and it just didn't really work out. And then I ended that relationship with her, and then I was really kind of at a low point where I'm I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think I'm going to get anything published. I was walking down the sidewalk in New York, and it's just really not a happy day. And then I just kind of snapped myself out of it and started to create some. Actually, what also happened at the same time is I started working on some news stories, but then I also participated in Inktober. This was in 2014. This was my first time that I did it. And I was so bummed out that I think I didn't get in my head as much as I usually do. And I kind of just said, like, I'm just going to draw. Like, that's kind of what I love to do. I'm just going to really kind of go for this challenge and draw what I don't think I can draw. And it worked out really well. It was like a very rewarding experience for me. And then some of the stuff that I drew in that challenge ended up becoming like the seeds for some of the books that are now getting published this year. And, you know, there's more to come. So it was kind of like one of those moments in life where you're like, you can go one of two ways. You can either just accept that, like, this is a bad day and I'm just going to be upset and not do anything about it. Or you can just kind of like tell yourself life's too short, snap out of it, just get back into the groove and find a way to get yourself excited again. And that's hard. It's not easy to do, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, that was like 26, I think 20. Yeah. Like I was like late 20s when I decided, like, all right, I'm really going to give this one more chance. Mm-hmm. And then luckily that push kind of pushed me over onto the next, the next level. And so then I'm now published and have projects coming and that kind of stuff. So it, do or die kind of moment.
Oh, super cool. And before maybe we get to your projects, what you are working on now, how was it with that Inktober that you started to create characters and stories when you said it was a starting point for the books? How do you go about starting a story? Like, do you have like some elements in mind or settings, or like, do you draw a map for, your story?
So it's different every time. I think what happened with Inktober is I was just focused on creating illustrations that told some kind of story. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, I guess, how I like to work in general, where I'm not excited about something that I'm sketching or illustrating if it doesn't feel like it's communicating some kind of moment or feeling or idea. Mm-hmm. So with Inktober, it was actually the second day that I drew this little girl on top of a tortoise because I'd just seen a photo of a tortoise earlier in the day, and I just thought they're just so cool looking. And then I wanted to just have some contrast. I mean, this wasn't a very, revolutionary idea. It just was like, tortoises are slow. What's fast? Kids tend to be fast because they have a ton of energy. So I'm just going to pair those two together. And I certainly wasn't the first person to draw a kid on top of a tortoise. But anyway, so I had that drawing and I just really liked it. And I thought, there could be a story here. And then I went through like 3 or 4 different ideas mm-hmm. over the course of about a year, where I was like, what if the little girl hurts her ankle and she, can't get home, and she, hops on the back of a tortoise to get a ride home. And because he moves slowly, kind of forces her to slow down and like look at the world. So I thought that might be a fun idea for a book, but then it just didn't come together very quickly. And then I had more ideas, and eventually I was working at like 1:30 in the morning, drawing the girl and the tortoise in a different style. I wanted to try like a more fun style. And then I had this moment where I joked to myself, I was like, I'll never beat any of my characters in a staring contest because, you're looking right at them. And then I kind of was like, I've never seen a picture book for kids in which the characters have a staring contest. And that's kind of like that moment where I was like, that's the idea. And that's kind of how it works for me in general. I think that you have a bunch of bad ideas and you draw them all out, you write them all down, and then you just sort of sit with something for a while that you kind of feel might be right. And then you go over it 100 times in your head. And then eventually a smaller idea or a simpler idea may come from that. And that's usually kind of when I realized, like, okay, I think this is the version of that idea that will work.
Yeah.
So.
And when you started to create this story for this particular book, did you do a lot of sketches of this girl and how she might look and her like character look and feel and all of that? Or you had like right away, okay, this is how she will look?
Well, I actually have the original drawing if you don't mind. So she started like this.
Cool. So this is from
like,
Inktober.
This is Inktober.
Nice.
And this actually I gave to my niece. This hangs at our nursery, but I had to borrow it for an interview recently, and so I'm holding on to it currently. I just happen to have it with me. And so this is what it originally looked like. So, black and white and a little bit more detailed. And then eventually I did it in like a more of a cartoony style, I guess, where it was like, I just wanted something that was a little bit more fun. I didn't have the idea yet. I was just trying to see if another idea might come from a more playful style. So it was really kind of just experimenting. And I think by drawing it a couple different ways, I was able to eventually kind of find the idea that worked.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it's like, I think I drew them a few different ways, but I was really spending more time thinking about the dynamic of the girl and the tortoise and what the story could be.
Yeah. Because a lot of young artists or starting artists sometimes have the issue like, okay, how do I start with designing a character, because you have to think about so many different things.
Yeah,
you know, like maybe you can give us some like bullet points. What is your artistic process? Like,
okay.
How do you start and how do you finish, just like the main points?
Yeah. So I think usually what happens is if you have an idea for a story, there's a good chance that you're going to have like the beginning or the middle or the end, or maybe you have the beginning and the end, or the middle and the end. You tend to have one of or a few of those components. And what I tend to do is I will just take out like an 8.5 by 11 piece of printed, printer paper, and just do really small thumbnails of the story, just to, see how the story plays over all the pages and see the flow, see how the pacing is working, see if any moment or scene is slowing the story down, or is unnecessary. Like you can have an idea that like, let's say you have a joke in your story that like you love, and like all you can think about is like the moment when your reader reads that joke and ha ha, and it's great. The problem is that sometimes that joke is getting in the way of a smooth reading, it's interrupting the flow of your story. Yeah. And so you kind of have to really be critical of some of those early ideas that you're really excited about. You don't want them to get in the way of what the story could be. So they call it like, I think killing your darlings is the phrase. So it's tough. It's not easy, but that's, I think, the reason why you start with that really really simple thumbnail drawing of everything, because then everything's so simple that you feel it's easier to get rid of something. Whereas if you were to like do a full illustration and you have to trash it, that's a little bit more upsetting. So I'll start with thumbnails. And then once I have an idea of, or a version of that idea that I think works, I tend to usually send it to my agent just to, see if he agrees that like the flow is there. And then, but I don't get him too involved. And then I'll start defining what my characters look like and choosing my colors. So, once I've sort of defined my characters and my colors, then I can really kind of get down to doing a final version. And then I'm lucky now because I have some publishers that I'm working with, and we'll be able to sit down together and, figure out what works best. But I think if you're just starting out, you kind of have to just do your best, put together like a full version of something. And then, I think if you're approaching a publisher, have your manuscript, have your sample illustrations of, what the book will look like, and then maybe create like a little paragraph summary of what your story's about. And that's usually a good way to get an agent interested, and then even a publisher. So
perfect.
That's the process.
So, and when you mentioned like that the agent discovered you through working in Scholastic, right? So, or was it through social media, or how did you guys get in touch?
So it was a little unusual. So I'm work at Scholastic, but so I'm an art director there during the day, but I don't do anything like books. Like I'm in this division called National Partnerships, and I help create educational materials that go into classrooms and that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So not books. And then what happened is that I tried the graphic novel. I had to shelve it because it wasn't working at the time. And then I was introduced to some people who wanted me to illustrate their book. They had just seen my work, I think, through like a friend or something like that. And they said, you know, we would love for you to illustrate this book. And that was when I had that moment where I was like, I can draw their book and I can do their project, or I can really kind of give it one more try and do something that I want to do. And so I told them, I said, I really appreciate it. But I'm going to work on my own book. And they said, well, what's your book? And I told them my idea, and they said, well, we like your book better. So we'll help you. Yeah, we'll try and help you with that. And the book that we were going to work together on, it's still, you know, it may see the light one day. But they were the ones who then introduced me to a publisher, and the publisher, you know, thought that I would be good for a book that came out last year, which was for Derek Jeter. I don't know if you know Derek Jeter. He's a baseball player. But I then got sort of assigned to that book as an illustrator, and that's kind of where everything started to come together.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really cool. Yeah, because I started to wonder if we actually worked together somehow, because I worked with Scholastic through Lego.
Oh, really?
On the books. But you said like, oh, you don't work with books, but I worked on the Lego Friends books. So
okay.
That's why I was like, oh, okay. So, but we didn't work together. So good.
Yeah. No, I'm mostly on the educational side, and it's good, because I think that if I was doing books all day, I might give away some of my ideas. Or you have to be careful when you're working for a company, and you create a character that like you love and people love, and it doesn't belong to you, you know? So something that you have to be careful of. And I think that that's why my job is great, because I'm still in publishing, but I'm able to come home and do my second job, which is my own books. And that's kind of just like a nice break for me, to have the two. Yeah.
So when you mention also like the agent and all of this like networking, maybe how else do you promote your book, or like how do you get yourself noticed and you know, just put the word out there?
Yeah. So it's funny. It's like, I think Instagram is my biggest channel. But that's just something that kind of grew over time. That wasn't a plan. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, I was using Instagram as a way to get feedback, and also to get inspiration. I think that's one of the things that it's best for, is you're just constantly seeing the creative work of some pretty amazing people. And it just so happened that by participating in that, people liked what I was doing. And then I was able to sort of put my work out there and like notify people, being like, I have a book, you know, like I would love it if you could check it out. And so that's part of it. My publisher, they put me on a book tour, which was amazing. And then the rest of it, I guess is, through Facebook. I'm just now starting to get more on Twitter. It's hard. Twitter's tough. It's just, it's hard to like, cause you're excited about what you're doing and you love to share and that kind of thing. Like I love to share. And when you're limited to 140 characters, it's hard to like condense what you want to say. Cause I ramble, in case that wasn't obvious. So anyway, so Instagram, I guess, is the best channel for me.
Ah, cool. Yeah, because maybe you can even do like some book reading on Twitch or YouTube or
That's a good idea. Yeah, I've never even
streaming, you know.
It's a good idea. I actually really want to do that. I really want to get into YouTube and do some live stream drawing and that kind of thing. It's just tricky with time and that kind of thing. So
yeah. But then on Twitch maybe it's better because you don't have to do the editing as on YouTube.
Oh yeah, okay.
So, or just other live videos on Facebook, or you know, like also Instagram, because people are saying that's next big thing, how to get noticed or something like that. Because
really?
Also on Facebook, it's they are pushing live videos more than any other posts.
Oh really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
That might be something new in the future, like, but it might change, as they change algorithms all the time. So.
I know. Well, I mean, I'll definitely look into it. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It's a matter of finding the time to do it at this point is the only challenge. So, but yeah, I definitely want to do that.
And so how do you design your day, or how do you plan your week or month when you're busy with all the projects, So how does it normally look like?
It's chaos. So I've watched a bunch of your interviews, and I know that there are a lot of people on here who have calendars and, notebooks and all of these very adult formal things. I don't have any of that. I'm in a constant state of like panic and anxiety because I work full time. So like my day would consist of me getting up and, getting to my office at like, let's say 8:39, and then I'll get home probably around 6:30, 7. And then I try to give myself like an hour to like decompress and just breathe for a little bit. And then I kind of go right back to work. And what's great is that right now I'm working with 3 publishers outside of Scholastic, and we're all doing a bunch of really exciting projects together. The problem with that is that it means I have, at this point, I have 5 bosses. So I can't, I mean, they're all wonderful people, but they don't really, I can't say to one of them, oh, I can't deliver that to you on Friday because I have a deadline for this other person. Doesn't work that way, So I have to, and sometimes they'll come to you with something last minute where they kind of, not last minute, but they're, when you're getting close to that final art date, they'll say, we need you to turn this around really quickly. And that's when things just get interesting. That's where you really have to like stay up pretty late. And, so I'm working on that to answer your question. I'm trying to organize my day a bit better. That way I'm fitting in more like me time and just not rushing certain things. I think ideally, I'm sure you'll get to this, but like the goal is to have more time during the day to work on the creative projects. And it's moving in that direction. It's just, I think it's going to take a little more time. So.
Yeah, definitely. Because right now your main income is your full-time job, right? And then you have the other side incomes combining into that, or?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What's great is actually right now the books are the main income. It's kind of crossed over, but I think because I'm just that chaotic, paranoid, that's how my brain works. Is I don't want to do anything sudden, where it's like I've made it, and like it's happened, and start wearing a cape and like just do whatever I want. Like that's just not gonna work, and nobody wants that. So I think for right now, I'm very lucky. The books are doing well, and fortunately more opportunities seem to be coming, but that could all go away tomorrow. So I don't want to do anything too sudden, and just play it safe, because I also just like to work, and I think I like the fact that I can go into an office during the day and I have my coworkers who I can talk to and see, and then I get inspired by them and come home and do the other creative work at night. So I think for right now it's working. I don't know how long I can do it though, because it's sometimes
you need some rest as well.
I need to sleep. Yeah, so I'm working on that part.
So how many hours a day do you sleep actually?
There was a moment. It's much better now, but I had 2 books that came out last year, and there was a delay with one, and because originally the way it was scheduled was that they weren't going to overlap. But then because there was a delay, they both happened at the same time. And I counted, it was for 61 days. I was going to bed at like 2:30, and then I would get up at around 7:15. And that's working, every day of the week, full time, and then the books at night. And that was tough. That's okay to do, I think, like for me at least, for a couple weeks. But when it was for such a long period of time, that was challenging.
Yeah.
So now I'm much better about it. Now I know how to make sure that I'm in touch with all the people who I'm working with. And I'm saying, like, where do we stand with things? What do you need from me? Do you have any concerns? That kind of thing. Correspondence is a really big part of working in a creative field. I think that, you need to be able to communicate with people clearly, and know your dates and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, definitely, and know when to deliver, and
yeah. Because I think there's a certain window where or a little bit of flexibility where they'll understand if you need more time, but you definitely don't want to push that because they'll kind of label you as someone who's not easy to work with, and that will affect future projects. So
definitely, it's like the saying, you either are like good at delivering on time, or you are like super amazing artist, or you are like good with communication, and it's enough to have two. So either combination of each.
No, absolutely right. That's a great point. You just it's at the end of the day, it's a job, and you've gotta deliver. So yeah.
And what is the thing maybe you learn over time from making the books, or maybe which were like the biggest struggles, or like publishing actual physical product?
It's so funny because I think for so long I didn't think it was going to happen. So that now that it's happening, like, I'm just happy in general. So like the idea of like that part was really, I didn't like that. I don't feel like that's happened. I will say, there have been moments where you feel very strongly about, or I feel very strongly about, a character design, for example, and all of a sudden it's called into question. And it's called into question not by an individual, but like teams of people. And so you're all of a sudden having to defend yourself and your idea to a large group of people. And you have to really kind of decide, what battles you want to face, like when you want to fight, I guess, because there are a lot of moments when you're making a book, for example, where you'll say, I totally see where you're coming from. I'll turn the trees from that shade of green to this shade of green, and it's fine. It's not a problem. There are other moments where like you feel like something looks just wonderful as it is, and you would never think to change it. And then all of a sudden someone's like, we need to change that. And I find that the best way to handle those moments is to just do what that person or that team of people is asking you to do. So that way you're showing that you're willing to consider. Mm-hmm. But then if you still feel strongly about what you originally did, that's kind of where you put your, you dig your heels in and you say, I really want to keep it the way it is. And I think that that's when you'll find a happy middle ground, because I think people need to know when you're working with other people and you're a creative person and you feel very strongly about what you do, that the people who you're working with may not have the same skills that you have, but that doesn't mean that they're less passionate than you are. They are just as, if not more passionate, sometimes, and they are just trying to make the best book or illustration or whatever possible. And I think that those are those moments where it's like, you can really kind of just get really frustrated with people and be like, I don't want to work with this person anymore. And I don't think it ever really works out very well when you do that. I think that you just have to be rational about it, and you have to have a conversation. It's just, you'll never know when those things are going to happen. That's, I think, the tricky part. So you just kind of have to be prepared, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Is there something else you would like advise young self before starting the whole publishing art books and starting your art career? Something you wish you
for
would...
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other starting artists as well.
Yeah, I think it would be to not get too tied to a particular idea. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean, you don't have to give up on something. you just don't want it to become an anchor. You don't want to be tied down by something that you're so passionate about that it's getting in the way of you creating something else and then maybe coming back to it. Like, that's the thing I think that's actually pretty amazing about storytelling, is that, you know, the stories you tell are very personal. They're coming from a very personal place. And sometimes you have this amazing idea, but you maybe haven't had the life experience yet to understand how to tell that story. And so maybe in that case, it's best to, and this is what I would tell myself, I would say, it's not that it's not a good idea. It's you know, it's just that it's not ready. And you need to let it go a little bit and just get away from it for a while. And by a while, you know, it could be years, and then come back to it, because it's not going to go anywhere. It's sure, there's the chance that someone could take it, but I don't think that that's something that I think people worry about that too much. So I think that would be my advice. It would be, don't give up on your ideas, but don't force them. Because if you force it, then that's when you're really kind of damaging what could be a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because also, as you mentioned, like even if someone would want to take the same idea or copy it, but there is no way that they will do it the same way as you, you know, like everyone has a certain style and ideas and stories in mind.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, and I'm sure, I mean, I think we've all heard this at this point, is there are no new ideas really, you know, like everything's kind of been done, but it hasn't been done the way you would do it. So you can tell any story you want. It will be your story, and it may have similarities to other ideas that are already out in the world. You don't want it to be too similar, obviously, but like, you know, because that's copyright infringement. You know, that's where it gets legal. But it's still personal to you, and I think that, and this kind of goes in hand with the forcing, don't force it idea, is that people will feel when something is your story and like it's different because of this or that, or they'll feel, wow, this story doesn't feel right. And that, I think those stories are the ones that have been forced. Those are the ones that have kind of been pushed forward when they weren't ready. So patience is just a big part of it.
Sometimes we get like super impatient, or especially me as well. I'm like, I just want to have it done. And
because you're excited, and that's and also coming back to an old idea that you come back to it and it wasn't working when you were last with it, and you're like, this isn't working, and that enthusiasm is gone, and you kind of have to like figure out how to get yourself excited again. It's not easy. You know, that's like the hard part. So,
and when we talk about also the struggles, maybe can you take us to your story of like the biggest struggles or most difficult moment? Was it the time when you were walking on the street in New York, or was there other time? And maybe what you learned from it?
It was a cloudy, rainy day. No,
especially over your head, and just the cloud was going with you.
Geez. I think there are two answers. One is like the moment of writer's block, or you have one of those creative blocks, and then you feel like they're going to last forever. But that's maybe less significant. I think, that day is a good example. It's not the one example, but it's just a good example. It was just like I had poured myself into an idea and a story, and done I thought the best work that I had done to date for about 2.5 years. And it just it didn't really go anywhere. And so I was like, that was the day kind of where I made the decision, like, I'm giving up. I'm putting this down and going to try something different for a little while. And what's really funny about that is the moment I decided, okay, I'm stopping, is two things. One, I was walking down that gray, dreary sidewalk, and it was raining. It was raining, and someone yelled at me, and no, I'm just kidding. And I saw, it's really silly, but I saw like this old beat up Mercedes car that may have been abandoned, and then it was next to this like equally depressing tree that was like on its last legs. And I was just like, oh, like, where am I? Like, this is just like, everything about this moment is depressing. And then I thought, like, those two things could be characters. They look like how I feel. And I just, all of a sudden, without even really realizing it, I was starting to think about another story. And it was kind of like you expect to enter into this like abyss of just like, I'm not going to get anything done. I'm giving up on something that's so personal to me and that I care so much about. And then as soon as you step away from it, like, now I'm just going to be depressed for a while. But like you just kind of have to keep your eyes and ears open, and you're going to start to see other opportunities. Mm-hmm. That's really kind of, I think, how I would say is the best way to get out of those moments, is to just really and truly put something aside. You can come back to it, but just put it away somewhere that you won't see it and that you won't be exposed to it. And then allow yourself to be open to new ideas. Because it's not like that was a waste of time. Mm-hmm. You still did a ton of amazing work and you grew. Just because it didn't get put on a bookshelf somewhere doesn't mean that it's not valuable. So anyway.
So it can come at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I went back and looked at it the other day. I mean, it was the first time I think I'd looked at that story in, I don't know, 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is not bad. Like, this is much better than I remember. It needs work, but
Yeah. Because it doesn't have to become a story right away. It can just be one piece of artwork or a character, and then it can become a story later, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you think about like either the hard moments or good moments, was there like a best advice you can think of, like you ever received, or also the worst advice, either when you're starting out or just along the way?
Yeah, I have answers to both. So I think that this is really important for me. I think there is such a thing as good and bad mentors out there. People who you respect and look up to, and those people are capable of giving bad advice. So I'll start with the good advice. Good advice came from my dad. My dad is an orthopedic surgeon. He fixes people's knees and he's incredible at it. And he has always pushed me to, anytime you want to start anything, 15 minutes a day, start there. No excuses. Just sit down and do it. And 15 minutes, that's nothing, and that's basically a seed for devoting more time to that over time. So like start with 15 minutes and then maybe a week later, bump it up to 30 minutes. A week after that, bump it up to an hour, It's like exercising. It's like you're just getting into a rhythm where you're making this part of your routine. And it seems like such an inconsequential piece of advice, but I can't count the number of times that I've gotten messages from people being like, how do I get started? How do I do this huge idea that I have? Like, I can't possibly comprehend how long it's going to take me to do something like that. 15 minutes today. Start right now. And then over time, you'll realize that big idea. So I think sometimes thinking small, like when you have a big idea, thinking small is a great way to start. So that's the piece of good advice. Bad advice isn't actually anything. There wasn't a phrase or something that was said to me per se, but I looked up to somebody, and I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but I looked up to somebody when I was much younger, and it was a teacher of mine. And I explained that I was very interested in like children's education and entertainment, like Disney and all those kinds of things. And this was an after school meeting, and this person basically said, oh, those stories aren't very real. Like, they're not based in the real world. And kind of like poked a pretty big hole in this thing that I was very passionate about, and made me feel very embarrassed. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of stopped sharing the fact that I loved like Disney movies. Like, it was one of those things where it's this person who I looked up to had an opinion that they shouldn't have shared because they were a teacher and, you know, they had a lot of influence over an impressionable kid like me. And so I guess the point of telling that story is that it's hard to know when to spot something like that when you're a kid, you know, because you're a kid, you don't have a ton of experience. You look up to people who are older than you, and some more than others, and you take their advice very seriously. But sometimes, and people make mistakes, you know, this could have been an accidental comment, but you just kind of have to decide for yourself, or try to, at least when you're young, how important something that you're passionate about is to you. And sometimes you have to fight for it. So that's a complicated piece of advice, but my point is just be careful, you know, what advice you follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because also if young people are just listening to, oh, you cannot live from art, or you will be like starving artist, or it's not possible, and all of these things, like everything is possible, but you have to work hard for it. So it's like, yeah,
and that's the other thing too. It's like, look, do what you love, follow your dreams, follow your passion. I would never tell anybody to not do that, but you know, you have to work hard. You really have to kind of push yourself, and not just for other people, like a publisher, for example. You should be doing it for yourself. You know, you should be really kind of being like, I want to be the best at drawing horses, or I want to be the best at. It's like, to get to that level, to get to that point, requires a lot of time and energy and patience. So.
Definitely. And we didn't talk about the tools or mediums you use. Maybe you have something, you know, like special you cannot live without.
I hire these other people to do no, I'm just kidding. I have, these days I do almost everything on a Wacom Cintiq, you know, drawing on the screen. I also been doing a lot on the iPad, like on the subway to work or during my lunch. And that's been great. I think that iPad is getting pretty close to, like Procreate is getting really close to like Photoshop in terms of what you can do. I don't know if it's there just yet, but like the latest update shows that they're very close and they're on their way. My favorite mediums, though, if I had to choose, I think are ink and gouache. I would really love to do a book in one or both of those media. It's just, I also at this point still want to get more books out into the world. So digital works for me right now, but I think my favorites are ink, I think is my favorite, and then gouache, and then I do love digital. I think digital Photoshop you can do some incredible things in Photoshop. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love Photoshop as well, and I just really need to try Procreate because I'm just like bits and pieces, but everyone is talking about it, how good it is. So
it's great. What's really funny is I'm at that point now, you know, it's all balance, you know, in terms of doing digital versus more traditional medium. With Procreate, I don't know if you know, but if you draw a line and you don't want to keep it, you just tap your fingers twice on the screen and it goes away. Yesterday I was at work and we were having a meeting and I drew something on the board to show my team what I wanted to, like, because we're doing this program for one of our clients, and I drew a face and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, and I just tapped the board twice and I waited for it to go away, and then I was just like, and everyone's like, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing. And I got like red in the face. I'm embarrassed, but so that's something I will say. It's like, one of the biggest benefits of working digitally is that you can erase everything, and, you know, it's so flexible and forgiving. But I do think there is such a thing as getting too reliant on that. So that's one of those moments where I realized, all right, I need to spend some more time with like ink and gouache to bring myself back down to some sort of reality. So
definitely. And so what are the projects you are working on now? Something you can share which is not confidential, or something coming up in the future?
So I unfortunately can't go into detail about a lot of the projects that are coming. I can tell you that there are 5 coming over the next 2 years, and I think I can just say they're books, and then also, but I can't tell you what they're about, unfortunately. And then at the same time, I'm working on a new picture book about a little girl that involves lemonade. and very excited about that. Funny story about that one is I saw these two little girls outside my building in New York setting up a lemonade stand. This was this summer, and they were sisters, and they had just finished setting up their stand, and the older sister was looking very professional and very, ready to go. She had her business, and she was, this was it. And then her little sister was like, "Can I help with," and she pointed to something. I don't remember what it was. And the big sister was like, "No." I'm like, "You're just stand there." And I was like, whoa, like this is supposed to be this like happy summer activity kind of fun thing. And this girl was like, "I'm starting a company." Like she was like, "I'm going to be selling the most lemonade and like I'm in charge." And so that was one of those moments where you're walking down the street and you're like, that could be an idea for something. So I'm working on a story that's inspired by that now. And then I'm also working on a video game. Very early stages. It's going to be a long time, I think, before that sees the light of day. But I'm very excited. My wife and I, we both play. We've been gaming since we were, younger, and so I had an opportunity to finally sort of break into that space. And so I'm just now dipping my toes, and it's intimidating. It's a lot of work, but I'm excited. So.
Oh, perfect. And
yeah.
Let's talk about the future, and where would you see yourself in like 5 to 10 years, like your dream scenario, like what are the projects you're working on, or basically everything?
So the goal hopefully is to still be writing and illustrating books. I love that. It's such a wonderful way to tell stories, just because I feel like the words, the pictures come together in such a beautiful way, in picture books. So I'm hoping to still do that and hopefully put a lot of valuable books out into the world for little kids. I would like to see a video game, that I've done, that's actually good, I don't know how long this is going to take. I really hope I doubt it'll be 5 years. But that would be horrible. But yeah, so I think within 5 years, more books, maybe a video game or two. And I still haven't decided if I want to give up my job because I think there's something to having a full-time job and then being creative on your own time. Because, and I'm not speaking from experience because I've never gone full freelance on or anything like that. But I think one of the benefits is that when you're doing freelance and you're spending that creative energy on work for like a client, then there's a lot of pressure on the creative work that you do. Like I have to create to make money. And I'm lucky, whereas I have this full-time job where I can say like, I have that to fall back on. And when I have time to sit down and draw and create a story or that kind of thing, like that pressure is kind of off. So that I don't know yet if I want to not work, full time like that. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know.
It might be part-time,
Yeah, that would be certainly more reasonable. So.
Yeah, definitely. And my last question would be about far future, and I would like to know what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years or more, like robots years. Flying around and stuff.
Robots. I would like to be remembered for my looks. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I'll write it down.
Thank you. No, I don't know. I just finished reading Tomi Ungerer, the author and illustrator. I think he was German. He has a book. Actually, I don't know if I thought I had it right here. It's called The Three Robbers. And it's a beautiful book. It's an older book, back when books could be a little scarier, it's harder to publish that kind of book these days. But Phaidon, the publisher, compiled a bunch of his books together. Mm-hmm. And I had a chance to read that collection, and his books were just so, they respected kids, they respect what a kid can handle and how intelligent a kid can be. And also the design of his books are beautiful. So I think what I would hope for myself when I'm 6 feet under and there are robots flying around is that I've at least put some books that are worth remembering out into the world. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I feel like at the very least, if I can like look back and say that I tried, that's what I would be happy with that.
Definitely. So, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And before we say goodbye, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we'll slowly finish.
Sure. I thought about this. I think I heard a good piece of advice. I can't remember where it came from, but it was to do what you can't. I feel like I see a lot of people on Instagram who, at least from like an illustration standpoint, who whenever they draw a person, let's say, they may not spend a lot of time drawing the hands or the feet. And it's because they're hard to draw. And you'll look at all their posts and you'll see like great drawing, but like you kind of skipped over the hands there a little bit, or like you
behind,
hid, yeah, they're hiding, or they're, you know, like, you know, and you can tell that the person is struggling with that. And I get it, you know, it makes sense. But I think what I would argue, or what I would say, is focus on just drawing that one thing, you know, because if that's what you're struggling with, then like kind of like face your fear, and the feeling you'll get when you've kind of conquered that, when you finally figure it out, and how it will then affect everything else that you do, the mindset that you'll get from it it's a feeling that is hard to, it just feels so good. So it's not my phrase, but do what you can. Just do the one thing that you're afraid of, or the 5 things you're afraid of. Don't get into a place where you're just doing what you're comfortable with, because you're getting better at what you're already good at. So
yeah,
that's my advice.
You are just stagnating. So
yeah. So
perfect. Yeah, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I hope I didn't ramble too much, but I really appreciate this. Thank you. It was great.
My pleasure. And then you shared a lot of great tips, so I'm really grateful for that. And thanks everyone for joining, and see you in the next episode.
Bye everybody.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and let me know in comments. Also, please subscribe to my channel for more videos, because I post new interview every single workday. You can also find the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a little freebie waiting for you, so go check it out. If you want to listen to the interviews on the go, make sure to check out the podcast episodes at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and don't forget to inspire each other. I will see you guys in the next episode.